You are destroying your life, one postponed decision at a time. Not dramatically, not all at once, quietly, daily, in the small moments where you know exactly what needs to be done and you choose not to do it anyway. That is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. So I will. Procrastination is not a bad habit. It is not laziness. It is not a personality quirk you were born with. It is a slow cancer that is eating your potential from the inside while you watch, while you scroll, while you tell yourself you will start tomorrow. Tomorrow. The most expensive word in the history of human failure. Every time you say tomorrow, you are making a trade, your future self for 5 minutes of comfort right now, and you keep making that trade every single day, until one day you look up and realize that the life you were going to build is still waiting exactly where you left it, untouched, while time moved on without asking your permission. Here is the part that should terrify you. You already know this. You have always known this. The problem is not information. You do not need another tip or another productivity hack or another motivational video. You need the truth about what is actually happening inside you every time you choose the comfortable path. The samurai had a word for the man who procrastinates. They called him already dead, not as an insult, as a diagnosis. Because a warrior who hesitates in battle does not lose time, he loses everything. And the samurai understood something about procrastination that modern psychology is only now confirming. It is not about discipline, it is not about motivation, it is about identity, and that is exactly what this video is going to change. Welcome to VOID Dojo. In feudal Japan, there was no such thing as a samurai who procrastinated. Not because they were superhuman, because the culture they lived inside made procrastination structurally impossible. And understanding how they built that structure is the only thing that will permanently solve the problem you have been trying to solve with willpower alone. Let me tell you about a man named Uesugi Kenshin. He was born in 1530 in the Echigo province of Japan, the son of a warlord. Raised in a culture where hesitation was not a personality flaw, it was a death sentence. When Kenshin was 14 years old, his father died and left behind a province in chaos. Rival clans were already moving, advisors were already negotiating surrender. The smart move, according to everyone around him, was to wait, to assess, to gather more information before acting. Kenshin did not wait. He moved immediately. Not because he had a perfect plan, not because he felt ready, not because the moment felt right. He moved because he understood something at 14 years old that most people never understand at 40. The moment you are waiting for is not coming. There is no perfect moment. There is no right time. There is only this moment and what you choose to do with it. Kenshin went on to become one of the most feared military commanders in Japanese history. Undefeated in dozens of battles, respected even by his enemies, and every person who studied his life arrived at the same conclusion about what separated him from every other warlord of his era. He never waited, ever, not because waiting was cowardly, but because he understood that the warrior who waits for the perfect conditions is the warrior who dies in imperfect ones. That is you right now, waiting for the perfect conditions, the right motivation, the right energy, the right moment. And while you wait, the life you want is being built by someone who stopped waiting. Stay with me, because what comes next is where everything changes. The samurai did not solve procrastination with motivation. They did not solve it with discipline either. They solved it with something far more powerful than both. They solved it with identity. And there are 3 Japanese principles that together form the most complete system for eliminating procrastination that has ever existed. Not because they are ancient, but because they attack the problem at the exact level where it actually lives. Not in your schedule, not in your habits, in your identity. The first principle is called shuhari. Shuhari. It translates as follow the rule, break the rule, transcend the rule, But what it actually means for you right now is something far more specific and far more powerful. In the samurai dojo, the student did not decide whether to train each morning. The decision had already been made, not by willpower, not by motivation, by identity. The student was a warrior. Warriors train. There was no negotiation. There was no internal debate. There was no checking how you feel before deciding whether to show up. You either were a warrior or you were not. And if you were, then training was not something you did. It was something you were. This is the first and most important thing you need to understand about why you procrastinate. You procrastinate because you have not yet decided who you are. Every morning when you wake up and face the task you have been avoiding, you are having a negotiation with yourself. Should I do this today? Do I feel like it? Is this the right time? Maybe after I check my phone. Maybe after breakfast. Maybe after this one video. That negotiation is the problem, not the task. The samurai student did not negotiate with himself about training, because his identity had already resolved the negotiation permanently. He was a warrior. Warriors train. End of conversation. The shu phase of shuhari is the phase of following the rule completely. No modification, no personalization, no doing it your way. Simply following the structure with total compliance until the structure becomes part of who you are. This is where most people fail. They want to skip directly to having their own system, their own approach, their own modified version of the discipline they admire in others. But you cannot modify what you have not yet embodied. You cannot break a rule you have not yet mastered, and you cannot transcend a structure you have never lived inside. The shu practice is this. Choose one thing, one task, one non-negotiable daily action that represents the direction you want your life to move in. And commit to doing it at the same time every single day, regardless of how you feel, regardless of whether you are motivated, regardless of whether the conditions are perfect. Not because you feel like it, because you decided who you are. The samurai did not ask himself if he felt like being a warrior today. He was a warrior. The feeling was irrelevant. When you stop asking yourself how you feel about doing the work and start simply doing it because of who you have decided to be, the procrastination loses its grip. Not immediately, not dramatically, but permanently. Because you have changed the question. From should I do this to this is what I do. That single shift is worth more than every productivity app, every motivational video, and every morning routine you have ever tried and abandoned. If this is landing for you, stay with me, because the second principle goes even deeper. The second principle is KAIZEN. You have heard this word before. Continuous improvement through small steps. 1% better every day. You know the concept. But you do not understand yet what it actually does to procrastination. Procrastination does not live in small things. It lives in big things. Think about the last time you procrastinated on something. Really think about it. Was it a small task? Something that would take 5 minutes? Something that required almost no effort? No. You procrastinated on something that felt large. Something that felt heavy, something that when you thought about doing it your brain immediately generated a version of the entire task in all its overwhelming totality, and decided that today was not the day to face all of that. That is the mechanism. Your brain sees the whole mountain and refuses to take a single step. KAIZEN destroys this mechanism, not by making the mountain smaller, but by making the step so small that the brain cannot generate enough resistance to justify refusing it. There was a Japanese general in the Edo period who needed to train a completely inexperienced army of conscripted farmers into combat-ready soldiers in less than 6 months. His advisors told him it was impossible. You cannot turn farmers into warriors in 6 months. The gap is too large. The task is too big. The general did not try to close the gap in one movement. He identified the smallest possible action that moved in the right direction. The first day he asked his men to simply stand in a line, nothing else. Stand in a line and hold still. That was the entire training session. His advisors thought he had lost his mind. Within 6 months, those farmers were one of the most disciplined fighting forces in the province, not because the general had performed a miracle, because he understood that momentum is built from action, and action is only possible when the first step is small enough that the brain cannot justify refusing it. This is your KAIZEN practice for procrastination. Whatever you have been avoiding, I want you to identify the smallest possible version of that task. Not the task, the smallest possible version of starting the task. If you need to write a report, the KAIZEN version is opening the document and writing 1 sentence. Not the report, 1 sentence. If you need to work out, the KAIZEN version is putting on your training clothes. Not the workout, just the clothes. If you need to make a difficult phone call, the KAIZEN version is finding the number and having it ready. Not making the call, just finding the number. This sounds insultingly simple. It is supposed to. Because the enemy of starting is not the task. It is the resistance your brain generates when it sees the whole task at once. KAIZEN removes that resistance not by removing the task, but by making the entry point so small that the resistance has nothing to grip. And here is what the samurai discovered, and what neuroscience now confirms. Once you start, stopping is harder than continuing. The brain that resisted starting becomes the brain that resists stopping, because momentum is a neurological state, not a motivational one, and KAIZEN is the only reliable way to generate it when motivation is absent, which is every day for most people. The farmer soldiers did not feel like warriors on day 1. They felt like farmers standing in a line, but they stood in the line, and the next day they stood in the line again, and on the 100th day, they were something they could not have imagined on day 1. Not because they had transformed dramatically, but because they had shown up consistently for something small, until the small became the foundation of something large. That is what KAIZEN does to procrastination. It removes the mountain from view and replaces it with 1 step. And then another, and then another, until one day you look up and the mountain is behind you. The third and final principle is ikigai. It translates as 1 time, 1 meeting. It comes from the Japanese tea ceremony, and it carries one of the most devastating truths in the entire philosophy of the samurai. This moment will never happen again. Not a version of it. Not something like it. This exact moment, with these exact conditions and these exact possibilities, exists once, and then it is gone forever. The tea masters understood this so completely that every tea ceremony was treated as the most important event in the lives of everyone present, not because tea is sacred, but because the gathering of those specific people in that specific moment under those specific conditions would never occur again in the history of the universe. And the samurai took this principle from the tea room into the battlefield and then into every area of their lives. The opportunity before you right now is not coming back. That is not a motivational statement. That is a fact. The procrastinating mind operates on a fundamental lie. The lie that there will be another chance, another day, another moment when conditions will be better and you will be more ready and the task will feel less heavy. That lie is the entire architecture of procrastination. Remove it and the structure collapses. Ikigai removes it, not by making you feel urgency, not by panicking you into action, but by making the impermanence of this moment so real, so undeniable, that the fantasy of a better future moment becomes impossible to sustain. There was a samurai master named Yamamoto Tsunetomo, who wrote in the Hagakure that a samurai must make his decision in the space of 7 breaths. Not because speed is always wisdom, but because the man who cannot decide in 7 breaths is a man who does not truly understand that the moment he is hesitating in is already ending. 7 breaths. That is your ikigai practice. The next time you face something you have been avoiding, I want you to take 7 slow, deliberate breaths, and on the 7th breath, you move. Not because you feel ready, not because the time is right, but because you have just spent 7 breaths in full awareness of one simple truth. This moment is ending, right now, as you breathe, and when it is gone, it takes with it the possibility it contained. The samurai who understood ikigai did not need motivation. He did not need discipline in the conventional sense. He simply saw clearly what was happening, and responded to reality instead of to the comfortable fiction that tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow is not better. Tomorrow is just today, with less time. 3 principles. 1 complete system. Shuhari. Stop negotiating with yourself about whether to do the work. Decide who you are, and do what that person does, every day, without asking how you feel about it. KAIZEN. Stop seeing the whole mountain. Find the smallest possible step. Take it. Let momentum do the rest. Ichigai. Stop believing in tomorrow. This moment is the only moment that has ever existed or will ever exist for you. Use it. The samurai did not procrastinate because they lived inside a philosophy that made the comfortable lie impossible to sustain. They saw reality clearly. They knew who they were. They understood that this moment was the only moment. And now you have that philosophy too. The question is the same one it has always been. What are you going to do with this moment? Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when conditions improve, now. Because the samurai was right about one thing above all others. The warrior who hesitates is already dead. Do not be already dead. The path is long. Walk it anyway. This is VOID Dojo.